we've got to stop and take stock in conference realignment and what it means for the sport. And I'm going to lump in, by the way, the move that USC and UCLA made to the Big Ten with Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC. Because to me, in particular, in hindsight, come 5-10 years from now, we're going to view this as all just one move. So I've got 3 main points that I want to get to as it relates to conference realignment. Let's walk through them. Okay, conference realignment, first and foremost. Folks, this was inevitable. Okay, so if you just kind of pull yourself back and go 30,000-foot view for a moment and view college football and the landscape of college football, you kind of fall on the fact that this was inevitable, in particular for some of these brands. Texas and Oklahoma, and USC more specifically. I think UCLA, in a large degree, was kind of along for the ride. Now, having said that, this is all born out of the fact that these media rights negotiations were going to start to come up and be renegotiated currently for 2024, 2025, so on and so forth. So everybody had to take stock individually as a program of where they were at in the landscape of college football. And when you look at it that way, you realize that brands like Oklahoma, Texas, and USC, which were carrying in large degree the revenue and the media rights value for their respective conferences, they could not stand idly by and take a share that was going to be so substantially less than where the SEC was going to go with their new revenue and where the Big Ten was going to go with their new revenue deal. I think everybody understands that, right? You'd have to be buried under a rock to not understand that. And so that lands at the point, this was somewhat inevitable. As hard as it is to swallow for some, this was inevitable. That leads to the second point. I don't want to be revisionist in our look at history of college football. Remember now, college football has evolved from a conference standpoint throughout its history. And this has been going on forever. Let me just give you a quick example. Let's take the Pac-12 as an example. Did you know it's got its origins in the Pacific Coast Conference? Then it was the Athletic Association of Western Universities. Then it was the Pac-8. Then in 1978, it expanded into the Arizona schools and became the Pac-10. Then in 2010, it expanded into the Mountain Time Zone, and it got Utah and Colorado and was the Pac-12. The point is, it has been evolving forever. In fact, did you know that Idaho used to be in the Pacific Coast Conference? They got left out when it became the Athletic Association of Western Universities. So this has been happening for a long time. It's been happening in the SEC. The Big Eight was saving the Southwest Conference or portions of it and invited Texas in. The evolution of college football has been something that has been as much a part of college football as the Rose Bowl. We just don't want to acknowledge it. And the other important note about the evolution of the sport, in particular when it comes to conferences and the alignment of conferences, is that every one of these moves throughout history has been made for really one of two reasons: security or finances. And I know both are tied together. Very rarely do you get a move that is just out of this is just for nostalgia. No, it's generally not. It's born out of where is the better spot for my university, or what's the better move for our conference to become stronger and more sound fiscally and monetarily. So it's changed constantly, folks. So I think this wringing of hands about this is destroying the sport. That's not really the case. I understand that it's not easy for some. I understand that it's not palatable in some ways, but it's not new. And that's a truth that we at least have to acknowledge. So this was inevitable. This has been going on for a long time. So really the question becomes okay, well, is it going to be better? What's the future of the sport now that these moves are and have taken place? I think in order to evaluate that, it's really about two questions. Where are we in college football? And then where are we going? Okay, so let's sit with those for just a moment. Okay, so where are we in college football? Well, right now, I would argue, and most would argue, by the way, that are involved in the sport, that it's never been better. In many ways, it's never been better. I'll acknowledge some issues in a moment, but I just want to impress upon the fact that the interest in the sport has never been higher. The quality of the sport has never been higher. right? Like these players are incredible. The attendance is incredible. The interest, the ratings, they're incredible. College football has become a very clear number 2 product in our country. That wasn't always the case. It's a very clear number 2 product ahead of even the NBA, ahead of Major League Baseball, ahead of scripted entertainment. You look at the top 100 television shows ratings-wise, and you're going to see a lot of college football in there, dominated by the NFL, a lot of college football, a sprinkling of other things. You've got to get into the World Series or the NBA Finals for either of those other sports to garner enough ratings to get into that top 100. So it's never been better in a large portion. Now, there are some issues, okay? The governance of the sport, the structure of the sport, yeah, it's kind of screwed up, right? We need to get our arms around that. The postseason has got to get fixed. And by the way, when I talk about governance, that's transfers and NIL and all of that different stuff. The parity or lack of parity, lack of competitiveness in the sport, I think that needs to be addressed. There's no doubt. So then where are we going? That's where we are. Where are we going? Well, for me, I think we're going to a place where you're going to get some of the cooks out of the kitchen, and you've got 2 clear leaders now in the SEC and the Big Ten, and they're going to be able to fix some of these issues. We're moving to a place because of the structure and the new structure of the sport where you're going to be able to fix some of the governance. You're going to be able to fix the postseason, and maybe through a fix of the postseason and the governance, you'll be able to fix some of the lack of competitiveness or lack of parity that we've got in college football. A lot of people don't want to acknowledge this, but I, for one, am here to tell you, I actually think, as hard as this is for some, we may be headed in a direction where college football becomes even better in the future. I firmly believe that. The 3 issues we have, governance, playoff, and lack of parity, all 3 of those can be addressed more efficiently now that we've got 2 clear leaders in college football in the Big Ten and the SEC. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoy that clip, make sure you click subscribe somewhere down here. From game highlights to exclusive interviews and rankings, we've got everything you need as a college football fan right here, College Football on Fox.